Welcome to Speak Forward English, where we help you master the language with confidence.
Hey, Jerry, how are you doing today?
Sophia, I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for asking. How about you? You seem very energetic today.
I am. I had a great morning, honestly. I had my coffee, did a little walk outside, and now I'm just super excited to talk about today's topic because I feel like this is something that so many people struggle with, especially English learners.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, even native speakers struggle with this sometimes. Like, this is not just an English learner problem, this is a human problem.
That is such a good point. It really is. And the topic today is how to say no politely in English. And I know when I say that, some people are already feeling a little uncomfortable just hearing the word no. Like just the word itself makes people nervous.
Right. And I think that's because, growing up, a lot of us were taught that saying no is rude. Like, you don't say no to people. You help everyone. You agree with everyone. You make everyone happy. And that idea kind of sticks with us as we grow up.
Exactly. And when you're learning a second language like English, it becomes even more complicated because you're not just dealing with the emotional side of saying no, you're also trying to figure out the right words, the right tone, the right expressions. And if you don't know how to say it properly, it can come out sounding really harsh or really awkward.
Yes, and that's the worst feeling, right? When you're trying to be polite, but it comes out wrong and the other person looks at you like, wow, okay.
Yes, that look. Everyone knows that look. So today we're going to break this down in a really practical way. We're going to go through different situations, different phrases, different strategies. And by the end of this conversation, you should feel a lot more confident saying no in English.
And we really want this to be useful for you. So if you're listening and you find this helpful, please go ahead and subscribe to Speak Forward English. It really helps us keep making content like this for you. We put a lot of love into these episodes, and we want to keep going, so your support means everything.
It really does. Okay, so let's dive in. First, I want to talk about why saying no feels so difficult, because I think before we get into the phrases and examples, we need to understand the root of the problem. Why do people find it so hard to say no?
So I think there are a few reasons. The first one is fear of conflict. A lot of people don't want to say no because they're afraid it'll start an argument or create tension. They think, if I say no, the other person's going to get upset and then things are going to be awkward between us.
Yes, and that fear is very real, especially in professional settings. Like if your boss asks you to do something and you want to say no, that feels very scary.
Totally. And then there's also the fear of being seen as selfish or unhelpful. Like, if I say no, people are going to think I don't care. People are going to think I'm not a team player, and nobody wants that reputation.
That's such a real thing. And I think another big reason is that people don't have the language for it. They literally don't know what to say. So instead of saying no, they either say yes and then feel terrible about it, or they say nothing and then just avoid the situation, which honestly can be even worse.
The avoidance strategy, yes, we've all been there. Just not answering messages, hoping the problem goes away on its own.
Which it never does, by the way. It never does. It always comes back. Okay, so now that we understand why it's difficult, let's start talking about how to actually do it. And I want to start with the most basic, most foundational thing, which is you don't have to explain yourself every single time.
Oh, that's such a good starting point, because I think a lot of people feel like if they say no, they have to give this long, detailed explanation and justify themselves completely, and that's actually not true.
Right, you can give a brief reason, and that's perfectly fine and actually comes across as more natural, but you don't owe anyone a 10-minute essay about why you can't do something.
Exactly. So let's talk about some simple ways to say no. And let's start with maybe the most gentle, most indirect way, which is softening the no before you even say it.
Yes. Okay, so in English, and especially in American English, we tend to soften things a lot. We don't usually just say no, boom, done. We kind of ease into it. And one of the most common ways to do that is to start with appreciation or empathy before you deliver the no.
Right. So, for example, let's say a coworker comes up to you and says, "Hey, can you cover my shift on Saturday?" And you don't want to do it. Instead of just saying, "No, I can't," you could say something like, I'd really appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not going to be able to make it on Saturday.
See how that works? You start with something warm, I really appreciate you thinking of me, and then you move into the no. And the word but is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. It's the turning point of the sentence.
And notice the phrasing, too. I'm not going to be able to is softer than I can't or I won't. It sounds less like a choice and more like a circumstance, even if it is a choice.
Which is totally fine, by the way. You're allowed to make choices. You don't have to do everything everyone asks you. But yes, the phrasing makes it feel softer.
Let's do another example. Let's say someone invites you to a party and you just don't want to go. You're an introvert, you're tired, whatever the reason. How would you say no to that?
Okay, so you could say, that sounds really fun. I wish I could make it, but I've already got plans that evening. And even if your plans are just staying home and watching TV, that's still plans. Those are your plans. Your rest is a plan.
Yes, rest is a plan. Self-care is a plan. I love that. And notice again, you start with something positive. That sounds really fun. And then you express regret. I wish I could make it. And then you give a brief reason.
And you don't have to say what your plans are. You can just say, I've already got plans. That's it. You don't need to explain further unless you want to.
Right. And actually, one thing I want to point out is that over-explaining can sometimes make things worse. Like, if you go into too much detail, it could actually sound like you're making excuses, and the other person might start poking holes in your reasons.
Oh, that is so true. Like if you say, I can't come because I have to pick up my cousin from the airport, but actually my cousin might be landing at a different time, so maybe I could come, but then I also have this other thing. See how that just makes everything messier?
Yes, the more you explain, the more complicated it gets. Keep it simple. I appreciate the invite, but I have other plans. Done.
Perfect. Okay, let's move into another category. Let's talk about saying no at work, because the workplace is one of the most common places where people struggle with this. And there are a few different situations here. There's saying no to your boss, saying no to a colleague, and saying no to a client. And these are all slightly different.
Let's start with saying no to a colleague, because that's probably the least scary of the three. So imagine a colleague asks you to help them with a project, but you're already completely overwhelmed with your own work. How do you handle that?
Okay, so a great phrase here is, I'd really love to help you with this, and I want to be honest with you, I'm completely swamped right now, and I don't think I'd be able to give it the attention it deserves. And that last part is really nice because you're framing your no as something that's actually good for them too. You're saying, I don't want to help you poorly, I want to help you well.
Oh, I love that framing. I don't want to give it less than it deserves. That's so considerate sounding. And it's probably true. If you're overwhelmed, your help wouldn't be very good anyway.
Exactly. And you could also add something like, maybe we can revisit this next week, which softens it even further and shows that you're not just blowing them off completely.
Yes, offering an alternative or a future option is a really powerful way to make a no feel less final. It shows goodwill. It shows you're not just shutting the door in their face.
Right. So the structure there is express willingness, acknowledge the situation, give a brief reason, and offer an alternative. That's a very solid formula.
Let's write that down in our heads, everyone listening. Express willingness, acknowledge the situation, give a brief reason, and offer an alternative. That works in so many scenarios.
Okay, now what about saying no to your boss? Because that's where it really gets stressful. A lot of people feel like they can never say no to their boss, like it's just not an option.
And in some workplaces, there's definitely a culture of that. But in a healthy work environment, a good manager actually appreciates when you're honest about your capacity, rather than taking on too much and burning out.
Absolutely. And the key when saying no to your boss is to be very respectful in tone, to acknowledge the importance of what they're asking, and to offer a solution or compromise.
So for example, let's say your boss comes to you on a Friday afternoon and says, "Can you get this report done by Monday morning?" And you know it's going to take way more time than that. You could say, "I absolutely want to get this done well for you. I want to be transparent. Doing it by Monday would mean rushing it, and I don't want to give you something that's not up to standard. Would Wednesday work instead? That would give me enough time to do it properly."
See how good that sounds? You're not saying, no, I refuse. You're saying, I care about quality. Here's the reality. Here's what I can offer.
And most reasonable bosses, when they hear that, they'll respect it because you're showing professionalism and responsibility.
Now, sometimes your boss might push back and say, no, I really need it Monday. And in that case, you can say something like, understood. In that case, to make sure I can deliver by Monday, I'm going to need to set aside these other tasks this weekend. Is that okay with you?
Ooh, that's strategic. You're essentially saying, okay, I'll do it, but here's the cost. You're making the trade-offs visible instead of just silently burning yourself out.
Exactly. And a good leader will appreciate that transparency. They might not even realize how full your plate already is.
Exactly. They're not always aware of everything you're juggling.
All right, let's talk about a slightly different situation, saying no to a client or a customer, because in a professional context, this one feels especially tricky. You don't want to lose the relationship, you want to maintain trust, but you also can't just say yes to everything.
Right. And one of the most common scenarios is when a client asks for something outside of the scope of what was agreed upon. Like they want extra work that wasn't in the original deal.
Yes, scope creep, they call it, and it happens all the time. So in that case, a good way to handle it is to acknowledge their request positively, remind them gently of what was agreed, and then offer a pathway forward.
So, for example, you might say, "That's a great idea, and I can absolutely see the value in it. That would fall outside of our current project scope, though. I'd be happy to put together a separate proposal for that if you're interested."
Beautiful. You're not saying, no, that's not my problem. You're saying, great idea. Here's the situation. Here's how we can make it work if you want it.
And that kind of response actually builds trust, because the client sees that you're professional, you're organized, you respect the agreement, and you're still trying to find a way to help them.
Totally. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about personal relationships because saying no to friends and family has its own whole set of challenges.
Oh, yes. Sometimes that's even harder than saying no at work, because there's so much more emotion involved.
Right. And there's often this underlying fear that if I say no to a friend, they're going to think I don't care about them. Or if I say no to a family member, there's going to be drama.
So let's talk about friends first. A very common scenario. Your friend asks to borrow money and you either don't have it or you do have it but you just don't feel comfortable lending it. That is a really tricky situation.
Yes, because money and friendship is always complicated. Okay, so here are a couple of ways to handle this depending on your situation. If you genuinely don't have it, you can simply say, I'm so sorry, I wish I could help, I'm a little tight right now myself. And that's perfectly honest and perfectly fine.
And if you do have it but you're not comfortable lending it, you can say something like, I've made it a personal rule to not lend money because it tends to get complicated. I really value our friendship too much to let money come between us.
Oh, that's so good. You're framing your no as something that's actually protecting the friendship, not something against the person.
Exactly. You're saying, I'm not saying no because I don't care. I'm saying no because I do care about us.
And then you might offer something else, like, is there another way I can help? Maybe you can't lend money, but you can help them brainstorm solutions, or help them find a resource, or just be there to talk it through.
That's a really nice thing to do. Acknowledge the struggle, offer what you can, but stay firm on what you can't.
Now, let's talk about family, because family comes with its own level of pressure. Like, family knows exactly which buttons to push, right?
Oh yes, family has been pressing those buttons for decades. They're very good at it.
So let's say a family member is asking you to attend an event that you really don't want to go to. Maybe it's a distant relative's graduation or a family reunion that's 3 hours away, and you just can't or don't want to make it happen. How do you say that?
Okay, so I think the key here is to be warm but firm. So you might say, I love you and I really wish I could be there. It's just not going to be possible for me this time. Please know I'll be thinking of you. And then maybe follow up with something personal, like send a card or call them on the day.
Yes, the follow-up action really matters. It shows that even though you said no to the physical presence, you still care and you're still showing up in other ways.
And with family, sometimes you have to repeat yourself. Because family doesn't always take no the first time.
That is so real. You say no, and then there's a whole negotiation, a counteroffer.
Yes, like, but what if I pick you up? What if we leave early? What if grandma is there?
And in those situations, it's okay to just stay calm and repeat your no without escalating. You don't have to get defensive. You can just calmly say, I really appreciate you trying to make it work, and I understand this is important to you. My answer is still no for this one, but I hope it's a wonderful time.
That's called the broken record technique. You just calmly repeat your position without getting pulled into an argument, and it works really well.
It does. And the calmer you are, the more powerful your no sounds, because you're not reacting emotionally, you're just standing firm.
Okay, let's talk about some specific phrases and expressions that are really useful, because I think having a toolkit of phrases in your head makes this so much easier. When you're in the moment and you're nervous, it helps to already know the words.
Yes, absolutely. So let's go through them one by one. The first one is, I appreciate the offer, but I'm gonna have to pass. That's really casual, really natural, works great in everyday situations. Like someone offers you a second slice of cake. I appreciate the offer, but I'm gonna have to pass. Someone invites you somewhere, same thing.
I love that one. I'm gonna have to pass. It's very American, very casual. Next one?
That doesn't work for me. This one is a little more direct, but still polite. It's simple, it's clear, and it doesn't require a lot of explanation. Can you come in this weekend? That doesn't work for me. Done.
Short, clean, professional. I like it. What about something a little more formal?
For a more formal setting, you could say, I'm afraid I'm not in a position to commit to that at this time. This works really well in professional emails or business conversations. It sounds considered, it sounds professional, and it doesn't come across as personal.
Yes, and the phrase "at this time" is interesting because it leaves the door open a little without making any promises. It's like, right now the answer is no, but it doesn't necessarily mean forever.
Exactly, and sometimes that's genuinely true, and sometimes it's just a polite way to soften the no. Either way, it works.
Here's one I really like. I wish I could, but I have a prior commitment. That phrase, prior commitment, sounds really solid, like you're a serious, scheduled person with things going on.
Yes, it sounds so official. Prior commitment. Like you have a very important calendar.
Which you do. Your rest is a commitment. Your sanity is a commitment.
Absolutely. Okay, here's another one that I think is really valuable, especially when you need a little time to think. Let me think about it and get back to you. Now, and this is important, this phrase is only useful if you actually mean it. Don't use it as a way to avoid the conversation if you already know your answer is no, because then you're just delaying the discomfort and making things worse.
That's such an important point, because a lot of people use "let me think about it" as a way to escape the moment, and then the other person is waiting and hoping, and when the no finally comes, it's even more disappointing.
Right. But if you genuinely need time to check your schedule or think something through or talk to someone else before deciding, then this is a great phrase. And when you follow up, you can say something like, I thought it over and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to.